Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Mama podcast.
It's
I'm
my pleasure.
so glad you're here. This is such a cool special episode over here in person. Everyone, this is my living room. This is where I watch. This is where I watch. Bill and I are into Love on the Spectrum,
okay.
which is like the sweetest, most beautiful show. But that's not what we're here to show. Motherhood can be really hard at times, and you, of course, wrote a book about motherhood as well as other books. How can we see these hard moments as part of our personal growth rather than just trying to push them away and fix them?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm going to back up a little bit to answer this question. When I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I was like, I don't want kids. I felt like I really wanted to have a career. I wanted to do something that mattered. I wanted to do something that was really important. And I really kind of thought, well, I don't know, just having kids, why would you do that? And I was definitely one of those people who, I remember this and I feel chagrined about it. I was at a party once in Washington, D.C. in my early 20s, and I started talking to this woman, and I said, what do you do? And she said, I'm a mom. And I actually left and went and got a drink and found someone else to talk to.
Oh my.
So I was really like, this is not interesting. This isn't about, I really thought that it would keep me from growing.
Yeah.
It would keep me from doing what things.
It holds you back.
It would hold me back. It would keep me from becoming the person that I needed to be. So obviously I changed my mind eventually. I was young and stupid. And then I had my daughter, and then I had my son. And so my daughter was 2, my son was just born, so he was a baby. And I was in analytic training.
Can I ask how you changed your mind? Because I thought, oh, I'll have some kids sometime. When I'm 35, I'll start to think about it, was kind of how I thought about that. And then when I was 28, actually, it was here in this room. We had a friend come over, and she was pregnant with twins.
Wow.
And she was hugely pregnant. And I had this experience of touching her belly and being like, oh my God, I must do this. It was like this. I love it. Came upon me, and then I was like, we must have baby.
Mine wasn't quite like that. And it's a bit of a long story, but I'll try to give you the short version and then loop back to your original question. So part of what I did in my 20s was I was working for international nonprofits like refugee and relief agencies, and I'd done some of that work in DC. And I was really in love with it. I thought, this is my calling. And then I went and I worked for a refugee organization in Bosnia. And this was during the 90s. And part of what happened to me when I was this is sort of a short version in a way, but what happened to me right before I went to Bosnia and then while I was there, I just kind of realized that it's almost like I realized that the interesting stuff wasn't so much out there as it was in here. And that's one way of putting it. And I also, I got a little cynical about the work we were doing in Bosnia because so much of it was kind of I wasn't sure it was really making a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
And I think I just got so much more interested in the inner world and my inner world and the inner world of other people. And then I came back and I, went to social work school to become a therapist. And the day I remember is I was riding the bus in Brooklyn. And there was a mom behind me talking to her little toddler. And it kind of reminded me of the way my mom talked to me. And I was like, oh my God, I think I want to do that. Yeah. So it was kind of it was a little bit of a slower
inner journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And seeing the value of that inner.
That's right. Yeah.
Connectiveness and that.
Well, I was inflated, right? In my 20s. I'm like, I'm going to go save the world. That's what we call an inflation, and it's like, well, maybe what really matters and is really valuable is right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a profound shift to go from.
Mm-hmm.
To be really, really looking outward, to look really, then looking inward, and then really looking inward.
Yeah.
Jungian.
Yes. And babies. So there I was training to be a Jungian analyst. I was already a therapist, so I was in training to become a Jungian. And I had this little toddler and this little baby, and it was like one of those days. My kids used to wake up at like 5 every morning. That was like on a good day, and you're just awake for the day. Oh, that's so hard. And so there I am. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning. It's already been a long day. Like nothing's open for hours. It's not like we
No,
can go to the library.
They should have the little kids go to school at like 7 a.m., not the high schoolers, because they've been awake for hours.
Totally. So I'm like, well, let's go for a walk. Now it was bitter cold out, but I was like, all right, we'll go for a walk. So I'm pushing the double stroller. The sidewalks are terrible. It's, I'm sort of pushing the stroller uphill, getting caught on tree roots. It's freezing cold. One of the kids is crying.
Someone's whining. Yeah.
And I'm like, and I just had this thought. I thought, everything about this is so hard. And then the next thought came in. It was just this really clear, like, voice that said, yes, but I'm growing so much as a result. And I kind of went, oh my God, because of course that's true, right? I mean, there's no, there used to, when I was a kid, there used to be this advertisement for the Peace Corps. And it was such a great line. The line was, the toughest job you'll ever love, which is it's a brilliant line. And I think it's so true. Like anything that's really going to change us and engage us and be meaningful is going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And I just sort of got that instead of like motherhood being the thing that was going to hold me back and keep me from, kind of realizing myself or actualizing my potential, that it was actually the thing that was going to make me into the person that I needed to become. And that thought I thought was riveting. And I was like, well, I want to read. I mean, somebody's written that book, somebody's written about this, right? I can't be the first person to think this. So, and I was especially interested in reading about it from a Jungian perspective, because of course, like I said, I was in training. One of Jung's main ideas is this thing that he called individuation, which he used differently than it's sometimes used. For Jung, individuation was this process of becoming whole, of growing into the person that we were meant to be. And the goal is wholeness, not perfection. So it's about developing as many parts of yourself as possible and really getting to know yourself as fully as possible. So, that day with the stroller, I was like, oh yeah, this is an individuation process, So I really wanted to see, which Jungian had written about motherhood as an individuation process. And when the kids went down for a nap later, I got online and I'm Googling around and no one had written that book.
And you're like, aha.
Well, I did think right then that that's what I wanted to write my thesis about in analytic training. And then when I was writing my thesis, I was like, this is going to be a book.
That's amazing. Next time I see a mom with a stroller, I'm gonna wonder, is she considering the process of her individuation right now and the fact that this challenging moment is changing her and shaping her in an amazing way. Have you heard the word matrescence? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But I just had a podcast guest talking about that, and the idea that it's this sort of like adolescence, it's this extended time period of growth, and you're not bouncing back, you're changing into something new, and I love that.
Yeah, that it's a developmental process.
Yeah, and it just kind of honors the depth of it, that it's like something that is that life altering, that it changes you, just like the change from a child to an adult. It is that profound a change as well.
It definitely is.
Yeah, I think so. In my work with parents and, in raising good humans, I talk a lot about my reactivity and my anger that was coming out and my frustration with that. And so, I've learned an enormous amount about emotional regulation. We talk about that a lot here on the Mindful Mama podcast. And I was thinking about that in relation to the Jungian concept of the shadow. And I was wondering if you could help us understand how that concept of the shadow can help us understand those moments when we're losing it with our kids.
Yeah. Well, the central 3 chapters of my book are all about shadow and parenting, and that is actually kind of where I started
Hmm.
when I began thinking about it because, I was, well, one of the epigraphs where the chapters is this really great quote that just says so much is this, the novelist Faye Weldon said, "The best thing about not having kids is that you can go on believing that you're a good person."
Ah, yes. Oh, I love that. That's
And
great.
yeah, and I was like, wow. I mean, I was shocked at the degree of like rage that I could feel toward these little people whom I adored.
And they're so stinking cute when when, at least for me, when that temper started coming out,
Yeah.
like when Maggie was like 18 months and 2 years old, and you look back at those pictures and you see how incredibly adorable a child that age is, and you're like, oh, this is when my anger's coming out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not talked about a lot.
No, well, right. And I mean, I was having women come in to my practice and talking about like the incredible guilt that they felt about being angry. And I got it because it was, stunning to me. And I felt guilty too, but I was also curious about it because I got that it must be, such an entirely normal part of parenting. And then, of course, like I remember going on some like parenting discussion group at that time. And, I think it was the magazine called, what's that? Was it Motherhood? There used to be a magazine.
Mothering was
Mothering.
one.
It was Mothering. So they had discussion forums, and I went on their discussion forum and I typed in rage, and I got like hundreds of thousands of hits. And I was like, oh, this is not just me,
Mm.
And so I got really curious about it, and I did write about maternal rage in my book Motherhood. And you're absolutely right. It really connects with this piece of the shadow because we're not supposed to feel that way. We're not supposed to be that person. It's almost this kind of archetypal level of, it's like Kali, the dark goddess, like just takes over. And you just feel sometimes actually murderous, Um, and that's why, parents joke about it all the time. It's the kind of jokes that we make are pretty dark. But there's this little, I used to say, well, I'm either just totally loving them up and enjoying every second of it, or wanting to bury them in the backyard, and because I think it does evoke that depth, um, and it's
But it's like the opposite of how we conceive of
yeah,
motherhood,
yeah,
the opposite of we conceive of this nurturing, soft, welcoming, like accepting, like that's
right,
what I aspired to be, right? And that
right,
not, and I had specifically chosen not to exhibit the temper that my father exhibited. That was like a conscious choice, and yet there it was. It was so frustrating.
yes,
And it was the shadow. And I remember thinking, like, okay, this challenge is going to be my teacher. And is that the way it's
no, no. I mean,
young?
so part of the idea of shadow is that we all have one. It's all the things we don't want to be, and that it's better to become conscious of the shadow rather than just pushing it away. It's better to have a relationship with it because otherwise it kind of runs things from behind the curtain.
Mm.
So, and there's like value in getting to know your darker parts. It gives you authority. You're more solid. And so I was like, okay, I remember trying, before I had kids, sort of thinking like, okay, nothing that is human is alien to me, right? And this notion of like sadism, like taking pleasure in someone else's suffering, I was like, I can't see that in myself. I've never taken pleasure in someone else's suffering. And then I remember, my daughter, when she was a toddler, she used to hate to have a bath. And one day I just got so frustrated, like the water was too hot or it was too cold or there was soap in her eyes. It was so frustrating. And at one point I took a pail of water that was a little bit too cool and dumped it over her head, and she wailed, and I liked it.
Oh,
And I was like,
yeah.
oh, there's my safe.
Hello, shadow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, okay, this is very humbling. Like, I'm not proud to admit that. but I think it's human. And I think it's like, okay, well, now I know something about myself I didn't know before,
Yeah.
and I think in some sense, like what's the purpose of life? In some sense, you can make an argument that it's to know yourself as fully as possible.
Hmm.
And if that's true, there's nothing like parenting
Yeah.
to help you get to know yourself, both your good parts and your bad parts, but
I agree.
especially the bad parts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that, when you dump the pail of water, and you saw that shadow, I imagine it was like, it was like a hello. Hey, here's this shadow here. I imagine for your daughter, she's like, what's going on, mom?
Right.
Right. There was probably some repair
Yes.
that happened kind of after that. And that process of kind of knowing that this is of me as well as, of other people. What I see it as, I guess this value I see it as is like, well, you can, when you know, okay, I have, hello, anger. I've got this temper in me. I've got this anger. I've got this, sometimes I have this desire to see people frustrated or whatever these shadow things are that we have. We can see them coming and then we can maybe process them in another way. But I also think it gives us a lot of compassion
Mm-hmm.
for others. And I also think it makes us more, it, it helps us be a little more accepting of our kids.
Yes.
Sometimes we talk about it in my family, like, we joke that everybody's like at least 3% evil or 5% evil. Like we just
Yeah.
joke about it.
Yeah.
And then when somebody does some evil little nudgy thing, we're like, oh, there
it is.
so and so
Yeah.
those 3% evil. But I think it's so helpful to think about that rather than, and to just accept that, the process of accepting it makes it so that when we are inevitably human and we inevitably have darker thoughts or feelings or those difficult emotions, the anger, the rage, whatever it is, where it's like, oh, I see you. It's there. It's not like there's a shame when you can accept that this is part of you, that then it's like you just bounce back. It's not like you need to punish yourself for having this thing in you. It's not, I don't know.
And I think, so I came at it. I mean, obviously it was really distressing to me that I was having those experiences, but I also, I guess through my training as an analyst, I also was curious about it. So I was curious about my clients' anger at their kids. I was curious about my anger at my kids. I'm like, what is this? What is this about? Let's move in. Let's get closer. Let's find out more about it. And and I do think that it kind of invites self-compassion to be curious. It's like, well, okay, I yelled at my kid. I'm sorry I did that, but let me get curious about it and maybe I can have some compassion. And I think like you're saying, like in some ways modeling that kind of shows our kids that anger is something that can be survived. And of course there is this rhythm of rupture and repair, so you get angry and then you repair it, hopefully. And I was always really good at that. I'm a good apologizer, just, hey, mommy spoke to you in a way that I wish I hadn't, and I'm really sorry. And so, hopefully it makes anger a little bit less scary for them, because anger is important. There are these kind of benefits of anger. One of the, and I have some stories in the book about that. And one of the things that happened to me when I was when my kids were little was I knew this mom who had she came from a kind of abusive situation, and she had promised herself she would never get angry at her daughter. And and she didn't, she would like nearly explode, but she would leave the room. She never yelled. And it was a very odd thing spending time with this mom and her little girl, because one time I went over to their house and the mom went upstairs to get something, and this little girl, like, I watched her, she just pushed my daughter for no reason. And And I said, hey, we don't push or something like that. And the mom came down and she said, oh, she doesn't push. And I was like, well, she just did. But it was my kind of analysis of that later was, it's like the mom couldn't allow it in herself. So there was no way for the little girl to relate to her own anger and aggression, which are actually important for us to have a relationship with, that's kind of the thesis of my second book, The Vital Spark, but like, yeah, it's problematic and it can be destructive, but you don't want to, you don't want to amputate it. Like you need to figure out how to have your teeth and your claws in life. And what better way to do that than to have it, to be in relationship with it and have your mom in relationship with it and managing it, hopefully, but also sometimes you don't manage it perfectly.
Yeah.
Anger's messy.
Yeah, it's not always gonna be wrapped up in a perfect rupture repair bow.
Right.
It's gonna be, the middle path of like is messy by its nature. Never, the extremes are so clear and I think enticing because there's clarity in them. But in the middle where the wisdom is very, very messy. Yeah, there's a saying that this all reminds me of, which is to walk with your shadow in front of you, and I love that idea of like walk with your shadow in front of you. It's, when it's behind you, it's like chasing you. It's big, it's scary. It's something you don't want to look at. And when it's in front of you, you're there in relationships with it. It's not something, and you call these outlaw energies in that second book, The Vital Spark. So what does it look like if we're thinking about practical practices maybe, or looking at things? I mean, I have this beautiful dream journal. Maybe this is part of it for a mother or parent to reconnect with that inner fire without the guilt. Fear.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, those two books, The Vital Spark is not written for mothers, but there's some overlap in content. And I think in some way they really follow on each other, because one of the things that motherhood taught me was, gee, Lisa, here's your anger. Look at how big it can be. Can you make friends with it in any way? Can you get curious about it? Can it maybe be good sometimes? And, honestly, that kind of like that fierceness is really required when we're mothers, because we're gonna want to mobilize that ferocity at times to protect our kids. So it's good that it's there. You just want to be able to figure out how to channel it. And then the second book, there's something about being able to sit with your darkness that helps you really claim your authority. And so those two, there's two overlaps between the books. One is anger and the other is authority. And so both books have chapters on anger and authority. And The Vital Spark is basically, it's a book about reclaiming shadow. So the Jungian idea of shadow, and it was a term that he coined, is that we all had a shadow. We learn in the process of development what is valued and okay in our culture, in our family, what traits are acceptable or valued, and we learn what parts of us are not okay. And there's obvious things like, hitting your little sister over the head with a, toy. It's like, that's not okay. But also families have their own cultures. And so a lot of times there's like something that you're absolutely not allowed to be in your family of origin. It's a little more subtle. Like maybe you were not supposed to be lazy. Like sitting around and reading a book was not okay. In my family, it was not okay to be drawing attention to yourself. You were supposed to be very humble and kind of, melt into the background. But probably every family has something like that. You're supposed to be high achieving, or you're supposed to be athletic. And, going along with that is there's something that's in the shadow. So most of us have a whole bunch of stuff that's in the shadow. I also think that women, honestly, by dint of probably both nature and nurture, have certain qualities that we don't feel comfortable claiming and developing. Now, this doesn't, I know plenty of women who are really good with anger, who are really good with assertiveness, but as sort of on a population level,
Mhm.
we're more agreeable. We're, we're more likely, for example, to tell someone a white lie than an uncomfortable truth. These kinds of things are just, we know that this is just true. So something like being really bold, being kind of unapologetically angry, being really assertive, being ruthless is one of the chapters in the book. These are things, being disagreeable.
Yeah.
These are qualities that for most women are like, oh no, I can't be that. I can't be that. I had a friend call me up the other day who was having a kind of fairly minor conflict with someone in her life, and I know this person too, and it was it was like this third person who she was having conflict with. This is a really lovely person, and she was like, I need to tell her something, but I just can't. I don't want to ruffle feathers. And I'm like, it's okay. It's okay to approach this person and say, there's something that I need to talk about. But like most of us just feel like this is going to be world shattering to confront someone, to make someone else uncomfortable. Again,
Yeah.
not all women are like this. I actually tend to have a lot of like female friends who are very disagreeable. I think I really like disagreeable women. I'm not one of them by nature. I worked on it, and I have these disagreeable friends who would not have any trouble at all doing this. But for most of us, it's like, no, no, I can't do that. But when we don't allow ourselves to develop those skills, we're really cutting off a source of vitality, a source of strength, and qualities that can make a huge difference in terms of being able to stay connected with ourselves. Like those other qualities of like nurturing and kindness and attunement are beautiful, wonderful qualities that really help us get and stay connected to others, which is a very important thing in life. But to get and stay connected to ourselves, sometimes we need to make other people unhappy.
Mm.
And for some of us, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I can see that's a hard thing to do. And a lot of parents I talk to and a lot of moms I talk to, I do, when I'm coaching parents and moms, one of the things I teach is a funny little mantra that we talk about in mindful parenting, this idea of like, not my problem is something I teach them to say silently to themselves. And
Yeah.
this idea that, and it can be really awkward and uncomfortable, but also really freeing to say, not my problem to a lot of the problems your kids have. But I also think it's so helpful for you to just be grounded, your own person,
Mm-hmm.
your own person with your own needs and wants. And also, if they're having a big problem, it doesn't have to throw you off kilter. It doesn't have to upset you. It doesn't have to upset your world and make things a problem in your world. When your kid has a problem, they, maybe you've held a boundary and they know they have a problem. They have a problem and it's okay for them to have a problem. It's not my problem. And it's interesting to see people work with that and wrestle with it. And for me, I guess maybe I have plenty of disagreeable. And I don't know, I think I was really encouraged to be very individualistic and creative and all that stuff. And so it's okay for me, but it's really been interesting for me to like work with other women and moms and to help them, claim this idea of like, oh, I'm here for you. Like, I'm here for you, but I don't have to solve your problem.
Well, and I think for, going back to this idea about shadow and what we expect of being mothers, like we really, it's easy to get into this thing where you think that like a good mother will do anything for her kid,
Mm.
And I mean, I, learned the hard way that like, no, that's actually not what a good mother does. A good mother does what you're describing, to a point. You set a boundary and, it's, you let your kid have a problem and you don't do it. There are things you don't do for your kids because it doesn't help you and it doesn't help the kid. But that orientation towards the other,
Mhm.
like, I'm going to be attuned to you. I'm going to be attuned to your needs. And then, things get blurred because, you know, uh, um, I'll tell a sort of long story. When my daughter was a few months old, a friend from out of town was close by and I wanted to go see her. It was the first time that I had driven on the turnpike with my daughter.
Oh, I remember.
And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. She was maybe like a couple of months old. I'm going to do it. And I'm like, okay, I just have to remember the most important thing is to be safe. If she's crying, that's okay. She's okay.
Mhm.
Like she's in the car seat. She's with me. She may be unhappy, but my focus is to drive.
Mhm.
So, the drive there was fine. The drive home, she was fussy and she started crying. And I was like, Lisa, it's okay. She's okay.
Mhm.
Just focus on driving. And I was so proud of myself because I was like, I'm just driving. I'm just driving. And then I looked down and I realized that I was doing 95 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
And like my brain was like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. But my whole nervous system was activated
Yeah.
to the point where my foot was doing something totally different. And it took me a while to realize that like, that is a thing, right? Your baby's cry just gets your whole nervous system activated.
Mm.
And it's almost like you can't really control it, but there it is. And I remember when they were much older, just so happened, I think they were like in high school and junior high or something like that. They were both gone for the weekend. They were, doing different school things. And I felt so relaxed. And I thought, wow, like, what is this? And I realized that when they were around, I was constantly listening for like, who's going to start fighting? Who's going to come home and be unhappy? When am I going to hear a door slam? And, and I thought back to that moment in the car, like my nervous system was like so keyed into theirs that it was very difficult just to sort of relax. Okay. So fast forward another bunch of years, my son was a freshman in college. He was having a struggle. I knew he was having a struggle. I was so anxious that, I wanted to like jump on a plane and fly to where he was going to college and like sit him down and tell him everything he needed to do. Of course, I didn't do that. I didn't even think seriously about it, but that was my impulse.
Yeah.
And I thought about that and I thought like, actually what I wanted, like I did, of course, want him to be okay, but I wanted him to figure it out so I would stop worrying.
Mm.
That it was about, I wanted him to be okay so I wouldn't have to worry. Like, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not his responsibility to keep me from worrying. Like, that's actually mine. So in my distress, I actually did a dream incubation, which is usually kind of my go-to thing when I'm struggling with something. And a lot of times when I do a dream incubation, which that's where you like ask your dream, you ask your dream maker a question before you go to sleep. And a lot of times I wake up with a dream, but occasionally I just wake up knowing something. And this was one of those times. I woke up and I thought, Lisa, you have no idea what he's doing to fix the problem. And it was like someone had thrown a bucket of cold water on me. I was like, well, of course. I mean, he's this great kid. He's got a lot of strengths. Like something was going a little off the rails. Why would I think that he wouldn't be dealing with it?
Mm.
And of course he was. And like a week later, he fixed the problem with no help from me. I wouldn't have been able to fix it anyway.
Yeah.
And
And that's what he needed.
And that's what he needed. Again, it was like this. Yeah, the fact that I was having a reaction to watching him struggle, that actually wasn't my problem. And my anxiety wasn't his problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is a tough, tough lesson to internalize. And it does help to get out of the kind of giver mode, the sort of the caregiver position where we're just focused on the other person's needs.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the right place to be when you have an infant,
Yes.
but it changes as they get older.
Pretty quickly in some ways.
Yeah.
I know.
Yes.
Still, your needs are always as important as your kids' needs in some ways. Just an infant's needs are so much more urgent,
Yes.
but it's not like you can push your needs off forever, right? You can push them off for a little while,
Right.
but you can't forever. You have needs as a human and they come back. That's interesting because that's like when a kid is really upset, right? And we want to be like, you stop crying so I feel better.
Totally.
Right?
Totally.
You stop having a problem so I feel better. And that's not their job to regulate their the emotions so we can regulate ours.
Right.
It's interesting. Like we we affect each other, but yeah, that whole responsibility. Well, I before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about the idea of, in your podcast, which I love, This Jungian Life, you explore the idea of archetypes. And I was wondering how might recognizing archetypes that we're unconsciously acting out, like the martyr or the rescuer, kind of to go back to what we were talking about, help us show up more consciously in our relationships with our kids.
Well, so Jung's idea of the archetypes is that there are these kinds of primordial universal energies that are always there. We're sort of born with them. If you want to think about it, I think in a way it's another way of thinking about an instinct, in that we're just kind of born with a potential, I would say. And this winds up leading to different cultures will create images of archetypes. And so, for example, every culture has a kind of maternal goddess, whether it's the Virgin Mary in a kind of Christian culture, or the Venus of Willendorf, or
on that note, have you ever been to, I mean, maybe I'd probably never been to Abu Dhabi, but I got to go to a parenting conference there.
Wow.
And the Louvre Abu Dhabi is amazing in that it organizes all the artwork from different times around the archetypes.
Oh my gosh, I need to go. Stop it.
All the like motherhood figures together from different cultures.
Oh.
It's so simple. I have goosebumps telling you about this because it was so profound to experience them all together by way of archetype. Now you have to get on.
No, I do. No, I believe, or at least buy the book. But yes, that's exactly it. I mean, you can look at every culture and there's some kind of version of that kind of mother goddess. So the mother is one of the big archetypes, but the mother every archetype has two poles. There's the positive pole and the negative pole. So that the negative mother looks like someone who's smothering or devouring. So you look at like the goddess like Kali that I mentioned before. There are other kind of dark mother goddesses. And I think that, when we were talking about rage before, and I kind of said, it's kind of an archetypal experience. It can be like when we first have that baby and we bring that baby home, we can really feel like we're embodying that positive mother archetype. It's almost, you feel something almost a little more than human. I remember talking to one woman who had a really profound birth experience, and she really just felt like she was inhabiting the goddess while she was in the throes of it. I certainly felt that way. I mean, nursing was just so wonderful, and you're just holding this beautiful baby and you're nursing and all that good oxytocin's going, and it feels something a little more than just an individual human experience. It really feels archetypal. Well, when we, are just swept away in a rage, that's archetypal too. And I think that's how I understand it. And, then the negative pole has been constellated, and it's frightening. But it's, I mean, the point is you certainly don't want to get identified with an archetype because it's a bigger energy than human, but certainly the archetypes get constellated in our life at times. And I think it's important to have a way to kind of come back and re-enter just ordinary human and form, and remember that that's something that we touch upon at times, but that's certainly not where we want to live.
Well, it's interesting. I guess if you understand it as this archetype, it's like this other, right? That it's like mindfulness, right? It's like taking our thoughts and our feelings and kind of looking at them rather than being sort of subsumed by them.
Yeah.
And that's the same idea of like taking these things and seeing them as an archetype.
But in the moment, it's very difficult to do that because they're so powerful.
Yes.
But yes, later to reflect, it's like, whoa, what was that took me over there? It's like, oh, okay, it's good to be back with my feet on the ground,
In wrapping up, for parents and moms who are, listening, what do you have any practices and anchors to kind of bring us back to feeling grounded, to feeling present for motherhood that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, there's a book that I read a number of years ago that I talk about in Motherhood, and they have this great acronym of I believe it's PACE. So playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy. And I love that list, and that's a good list for your being with your kids. That's a really good list for being with yourself. So I think one of the main things that I see with women and with moms especially is that we can be so harsh on ourselves. We talk really harshly to ourselves. We judge ourselves really harshly. And if we can be a little bit playful with ourselves, if we could maybe kind of find the humor in things, if we can just accept where we are, if we can be curious, like I said before about anger, the thing is that it's very, very difficult, perhaps impossible, to be curious and judgmental at the same time.
They're on opposite sides of the pole.
So if you find yourself doing something that you're disappointed in, and hey, that happens, it's good to come at it with curiosity, because judgment isn't really going to get you very far. And it is worthwhile when you see yourself behaving in a way that you don't like. I'm not saying you should just be like, well, Lisa Marchiano said it's fine. No, it's good to examine it and try to understand it and maybe see what you can learn. And maybe there is a way where you can handle it differently next time. But the energy to approach it with is curiosity. Like, wow, that was really something. I just totally lost it on my kid. That was upsetting, but can I be curious about it? Like, really curious. Like, wow, look at how I was feeling. Look at what set me off. How surprising. Like,
I wonder why.
Yeah.
Where he's coming from.
Right. And then of course, empathy, which is, sort of like applied to ourselves. That's like self-compassion. Can we have some compassion with ourselves? Because motherhood is difficult many times. And we're mothering in a way that we weren't kind of meant to mother. If you look at the way hunter-gatherers mother, they weren't home alone with two babies all day. So
it's crazy making. This has been such a pleasure to have you here in my house, and I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. I'm such a fan of this Jungian life. Can you tell the listener who wants to explore more where they can find you and a little about the podcast?
Sure. So my podcast is This Jungian Life, and we're at thisjungianlife.com, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. And my author website is lisamarchiano.com. You can find out more about my books. I also have an online fairy tale group for women. We explore a different fairy tale every month, and there are prompts and live events, and it's a really great community, and that's at spinningstraw.com.
Oh, I didn't know about that. I love Clarissa Pinkola Estes. What's that called?
Women Who Run
with the Wolves. Yes, I love that book. I've read that multiple times.
Yes.
It's so rare. Now I want to explore your fairy tale community. That sounds wonderful. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you for doing what you do, and thank you for doing the podcast, and for driving down from Philly here to Arden to hang out with me. Really, thank you so much.
Really a pleasure. Such a treat, as I said, to meet you and to do this in person.